I've known Hillary Schieve now for more than a decade, long before running for office was even a thought in her head. Indeed, if I'd suggested when we first met that she would someday be the mayor of Reno, she would have laughed at me. Who's laughing now, Madam Mayor? Now, most of you in this room know of her remarkable life story, how she reinvented herself after an aborted skating career to become a self-made woman in business and a community leader, council member, and mayor. Her Honor and I have a bond, though, that you may not know about, and few people know about. We share an experience that changed our lives. Both Hillary and I are kidney transplant recipients. I got one from my brother, and she got one from her sister, and that bonded us a long time ago. And I think that we should give a round of applause to your sister and my brother. But that's about where the similarities end, I have to tell you. After all, she is so nice. I mean, she's nice. And I'm, well, not always. Her boundless optimism about everything never ceases to amaze me. It's not an act either, which is really, really annoying. I'm really looking forward to a candid conversation tonight with the mayor of Reno, Hillary Schieve. Please welcome her up here. Just how you wrote it, huh?
Right. Now, you said I get to ask questions first.
You do?
You're right.
Oh, you have a question first?
Don't you think I should be able to get some questions out of him?
God, oh, God.
Right? Look at these people. They're like...
So she's already learned the art of the filibuster. This one is not as naive as I thought. Do you have a question?
Okay, so I do. I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So my first question is, I hear a lot in circles that you're this really left or you're really right. Do you want to put on the record what party you are? What do you guys think? Right? Do you hear that?
I'm a registered nonpartisan. How about
you? Me too.
Yeah. So we're both fakers.
Right. The other thing I want to know is what has been the biggest disappointment about starting the Indy, besides Adam Laxalt refusing to give you interviews?
That has not been a disappointment at all. The biggest disappointment is that, again, and I'll refer back to what I said earlier, I never got much sleep. I thought I'd be able to get more sleep now, right? You know,
really?
Doing a TV show and writing a column and doing everything else. I get no sleep.
Well, yeah, because you've become an entrepreneur. You're building this big business. Not only are you the editor and janitor.
Yes, exactly. I
right?
do everything. Yeah, yeah, and worry every day. You know, about
right?
you know that
Making
people
payroll.
work. Yeah, people work for me who have mortgages and the rest of it. So yeah, the stress level has gone up a lot. So that's why I miss my interviewing chops, and so that's why I decided to get a willing victim here tonight. And I appreciate your coming. Are you done? Are you done with the questions now? Are you done?
I think they should ask you a question.
No. So let's.
Okay, go ahead.
You ready?
Ready.
Okay. So you recently did an interview on KNPR, the NPR station down in Southern Nevada, and this is what you said. You said politicians have a hard time looking at themselves, and you have to do that. So you've been in politics now for about 5 years or so. What do you see when you look at yourself?
Not good. After that introduction. No, we're just kidding. You know,
well, what did you mean by that? And talk about what you do
okay, well,
when you look at yourself. What do you see?
So I guess what I mean is that it's hard for me to see myself as a politician because, like you talked about, if someone would have asked me one day, did you ever think you'd be the mayor? I mean, the other day my sister and I are walking down the street and she looks at me and she goes, Hillary, and she like kind of, pinches at me and she goes, oh my God, you're the mayor. And I looked at her and I said, oh my God, I am. and so sometimes it's really hard to believe, but what I think in politics that we really miss is that so often ego gets in the way and just agendas get in the way, and I think being real and being very down to earth, it's something that I always want to be able to connect and really not forget who I am. So I think that, I mean, even if you look at Twitter streams, they're so scripted, they're so boxed, I think, by politicians when you look at them. So it's something that I feel like the other thing is they don't apologize. And I think when you're wrong, you need to say you're wrong. And people are much more, I think, forgiving when you come out and you say, I messed up, right? So that's what I meant by that.
Have you done that?
Oh, sure, I'm human. Absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm certainly not perfect. I'm probably, I'm hard on myself. I'm really hard on myself. I'm always thinking, how could we have done this better? Or, I mean, I really strive to, I mean, I love this city and I want it to be the best it can be. And one of the things I had to do is I had to get off social media, except for I do Twitter because, well, when you had 140 characters, there's not so much damage that you can really go through. But
it's 280 now, so you can do twice as much.
Right. But I was telling a friend the other day, I said, and I tell people this story a lot, that I never knew how fat, ugly, and stupid I was till I got on Facebook, right? And so I think that, you know, I'm not immune to those things that people say, and so my first year in politics was very rough. You have to get very tough. You have to have that tough skin to sort of take a lot of the criticism, and you have to really believe in your heart of hearts that what you're doing is right. And so, so I did. I got off Facebook, and that's been very beneficial to saving part of my life, I think. But again, I mean, you know, it's hard when people attack you. It's just not easy. So I guess you know, I'm pretty sensitive, but I'm getting better.
You're very proud of being born and raised in Reno. And do you ever think about how the city has changed since you were born here, and how different it is now? What's good and what's not?
It's incredibly different. How many of you were born and raised here? Nice. Okay, so all of you that raised your hands, who remembers Hash Lane? Hash Lane, right? Right? And
will you tell the foreigners what this is, please?
So Hash Lane is now, what is it? McCarran, right? And it just used to be this 2-lane street, and it had these huge trees. Do you remember these big trees? And I also remember when Lakeside ended right there at Lake Ridge. Remember that, right? So I've really seen the transformation, and I'm so incredibly proud of the city. Obviously, I'm very biased, but it's a huge transformation, and I think today the energy is so different, and we have so many people rooting for Reno. That's the major difference. Right? So
what changed that? What made people suddenly start rooting for Reno? Well,
I think there are a few things. One of those things is you got to remember we were highest in foreclosures and unemployment and during the recession, next to Florida, right? So we really did hit rock bottom. A lot of people left the area. A lot of people lost their jobs, and so I think coming from that, and we really are sort of that city that sort of, I think I can, you know, it just reminds me of sort of, we really are very good at having this sort of comeback story. I think we always have been, as long as I've lived here. But now more than ever, I think people really are rooting for Reno, and it's really different. Now, when I went to Conference of Mayors the first time, they would say, oh, where are you from? And I'd say Reno, and they'd say, oh, you're the Reno 911 mayor. And I was like, ugh, that's not sitting well. But now when I go, they're like, oh, the Tesla mayor, or, you know, they're constantly saying, hey, I'm reading about Reno all the time. What are you guys doing? And I get asked that question constantly. But I also think it really is an energy. It's something that you feel. I met with some really big investors. They're investors of the arts. And they came into Reno yesterday and they said, I don't know what it is about this place, but it's got this feel to it that we've never seen before in a city. But Reno just kept coming up on our radar over and over again. And so we just sort of are like this magnet. There's a lot to be proud of, but I still think we have an incredible quality of life one of the best backyard playgrounds I think a city could ever ask for. But I think for me, truly, it's the people. People that move here, and all of you that are transplants, would you not say people in Reno are just nice? Aren't they just nice? Raise your hand, they're nice, right? Right? So that's one thing, we know hospitality. Real nice. Right.
I could tell you some not so nice story. Never mind. We'll do that. We'll do that a different night. I was joking a little earlier about your optimism and this niceness, but you clearly have you've had some frustrations, and you've learned. You thought you understood government maybe as a businesswoman, and you had some frustrations with government. It's part of the reasons that you decided to run. You were very active in Midtown, and you wanted to run for that reason too. But do you still think that government can solve most of the problems?
No. I've learned a lot. I mean, I was very naive certainly whenever I got into office. I thought everything would be really easy to fix, and I think that's one thing that when people sort of make that transition into politics, that it's not as easy as you might think. And I also think that we have to do things differently. We have to think outside the box. We have to be innovative. Times are changing. I mean, look at what social media has done for our society. I mean, just everything, and innovation, technology, those things that make it different. So I would like for government to be more innovative. I still think that they, for me, I'm not a big policy wonk. I get very frustrated by policy. So I just feel that sometimes that we get in our own way. We certainly get in our own way.
Give an example. I mean, you say be more innovative. I mean, people who come from business always use that cliche, I want government to run more like a business. But you're not really saying that. You're saying something different.
No, because I think, here's the thing. I think it's a culture, and it's got to be a culture of yes. Because what I see a lot is the culture of no. People that have been in government for a long time, staff that have been there for a long time. For instance, one of the reasons why I got so involved is I wanted to move my sign 2 feet, and the city wanted to charge me $5,000, and immediately it was no, 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 no. So, and I see that a lot. And I'll work with staff and I'll say, if it is no, we should say it within 5 minutes. I see where a lot of times they'll sort of hem and haw and they'll push it off. Well, when you're doing that, it costs business a lot of money, a lot of headache. And so I think we have to really get to a culture of yes, and how are we going to do things that can streamline the process. I just created a mayor's task force on housing. And so I think, and that's all about working with our planning department, working with the business department, looking at things differently and questioning them. Well, why? And you better give me a better reason. I want a better reason of why you can instead of why you can't.
And that was part of what I think when you ran, you said you were going to change the culture, or you hoped to change the culture. But that's a difficult culture to change. It's probably harder than you thought it was going to be.
It is. It is, but I will tell you this. One of the things I have to say is that I work with some really dedicated people that have been with the city for a long time that, it made me think a little bit differently. And they give their all. There's a lot of people that do, but then there's a lot of people that too are checked out, right? They're just sort of showing up. And that can be, it can be challenging. And not to mention, I don't know if people understand the structure of the mayor's role. A lot of people, they do think that I have a magic wand, which I wish I did. But I think, we just can't. People, I think, have this perception that I can walk into a department and say, okay, you're fired, or you're gone, or whatever. It doesn't work like that. We're a weak form of mayor government. We have a very strong city manager form of government, and that can be sort of challenging. And then you have open meeting law. And people will say, well, why didn't you call me? And I'm saying, well, you can only talk to one other person, or otherwise you're breaking open meeting law. And so I think there's some challenges to.
Are you saying you want to get rid of the open meeting law? Is that what you're suggesting here?
No, but I think, you end up with walking quorums or things like that, and you really want to pay attention to those things. But at the same time, you'll have board members say, well, why didn't you tell me that or voice that concern? And I don't think they understand the magnitude of open meeting law. You can't just go and have a conversation.
So making downtown more vibrant has been your focus. There's this business improvement district. There was some activity on that today. How is that changing Reno?
So there's over 1,000 BIDs in the country right now, and they are business improvement districts, and they have become very successful, and a lot of downtowns are implementing them. And I am fortunate I get to work with a lot of mayors, and so I get a lot of feedback on what's working and what isn't working. And I think now more than ever, downtowns are extremely compromised with homeless, drug addiction. There's some really, really big challenges. And this isn't just in Reno, this is all over the country. If you talk to any mayor, they'll say, I haven't found that silver bullet yet. But I think looking at what is working in other cities, and we went to visit Sacramento, is a business improvement district. And downtowns are interesting because I always sort of describe them as they're cities inside cities, right? They have bigger challenges than other parts of the city. But one of the things that they will do is we will be bringing in ambassadors into the downtown, and they're like social workers actually, and they deal with this population that struggles with mental illness, drug addiction, homelessness. And now more than ever, we have to pay attention to that because it really does affect us. So it's really exciting actually to see today we formalized the BID, which is huge. This is something we've been working on for 2 years. I'm really, really proud of it. And all the businesses really got together and said, hey, we want to make downtown better. And so, like I said, it's been successful in other cities, and I do think this will change the face of downtown. And I think now more than ever, we want a downtown that we're really proud of. We just did the master plan, which hasn't been done in 20 years, and it was the top priority in the city to see a revitalized downtown. And as you know, I worked, with revitalizing Midtown, but this has been a little more challenging. And so we really needed everyone to come together, and that's what we formed, is this incredible private and public partnership between the city and the business owners downtown. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really proud of it, and we'll see what happens next.
You're talking about it in kind of an amorphous way, though. This is essentially an agreement among a bunch of people to tax themselves, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then explain why that makes sense and what that money is going to be used for, and the accountability of it.
Right. So the other thing that I think is important, that it is actually, there's a board. People are elected. Typically, you'll put people on that board that have a significant financial interest, obviously. What I like about it is that it's not through the city. And that's where I think, again, thinking outside the box, where it's not government that's controlling it. It's ran like a business. And those funds are used like a business. And some of those, the residents there, their assessment will go down, so they'll pay a lower tax, which is nice, because a lot of the business owners, and there's been a lot of people that have said, hey, I'm gonna pay above and beyond what's asked of me. There's been so many people that have stepped up in the downtown core and said, we really need this. And I also think it shows a lot of compassion for a population that we see that is really struggling. I mean, now more than ever, we're doing so much more with less. And certainly, funding has been so limited in the mental health sector and drug addiction. And it really is becoming, certainly mayors now more than ever are at ground zero of those problems. And it just shows the magnitude of Reno really stepping up and saying, we want to tackle this issue, and really people putting their money where their mouth is.
Well, who makes the decision on what the money is spent on? This board does, or does does the council have any say in it?
Well, the council ends up holding one seat on that board. So there'll be a resident, there'll be several business owners. So it's a collection of people that are in the BID.
And so they essentially have to take care of themselves. It's having them buy into it, so they're responsible for it.
Right.
But doesn't that essentially then take an important public policy out of the hands of the people that have been elected to do it?
Sometimes that might be good.
You're talking about yourself.
No. I mean, you may. Who knows? I think it's important that people that have invested interest in the downtown or in those businesses have a say. I think actually that makes such a huge difference. There are people that are elected that have never had a business. And so I think you have to have people on there that have experience, that know what's best for their business. And most of them do. I mean, anyone in the room that owns a business knows what's probably best for their business. And so it gets difficult when people don't know that are making those decisions. So that's what I love about it, is that everyone sits on there has a particular interest in the BID.
So most mayors that I've dealt with, and I think most mayors anywhere, really talk about downtown a lot. Do you ever think about that there's too much focus downtown, and that other parts of the city, their interests are very different, and they might be neglected? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think several ways, and I think it's a great question, because a lot of people will say, "Wow, you're so focused on downtown." When we did, we surveyed over 9,000 residents, and the number one issue was our downtown. And really, it's been neglected for a long time. Certainly, when we went into the recession, a lot of things really went by the wayside. Just small things, you could just tell, whether it was lighting or sidewalks. A lot of these sidewalks are cracked. It's not walkable, and so. That's what it was pretty overwhelming once we took surveys to see how many people were so interested in revitalizing our downtown. One of the things too is that with these ambassadors downtown, it also allows the Reno Police Department to be in other sectors or other parts of the city. And so it actually sort of goes hand in hand. And I mean, you have to realize that when people come, even if they stay, here or at the Pepper Mill or wherever they decide to stay, people still want to go and visit a downtown. How many of you, when you go to another city, you want to see what's happening downtown, right? It's sort of the lifeblood of a city. There's a lot of culture there. There's entertainment. There's food. So a lot of people will come and check out a downtown. And so that's really important, that we, make a good first impression. I think that's really important. And so if downtown is healthier, the rest of the city will be healthier. And we know that to be a proven fact, because it allows us to get more resources into other parts of the city.
So that was a pretty good answer, but it didn't really come close to answering what I asked you. Which shows that you are becoming a politician. I'm very impressed by it. I guess what I'm asking about is that there are probably people who live in Reno, just like they live in Vegas or other major places, that don't necessarily want to go to downtown a lot, but they have needs in their communities. Right. Collin Ranch maybe an example. Other places where they want certain services that they don't have, and they think that maybe all they care about is downtown. Let's cater to downtown. Does that happen or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I will tell you. I mean, the mayor gets to hear usually everything that's wrong or bad, or usually, and I would say it's pretty overwhelming to see the support for revitalizing downtown. But I think you're right. There are people in other parts of town that might say that they feel like they're neglected. I don't hear that at all. I mean, I don't hear it much. I mean, I think it's very normal. I mean, in certain parts of the city, people will say, hey, advocate for more street lights or more schools, or I think just the typical, but I don't think we're seeing an overwhelming this area like we are seeing downtown.
So you mentioned being called the Tesla mayor now, as opposed to something else. But there are some downsides to what's going on, and you've talked about this, and especially the housing market here, the lack of affordable housing. What is it, $380,000 now or something is the median price of home? And I listened on KNPR. You compared that to San Francisco. Okay, it's not as bad as that.
Right, 1.5.
Yeah,
in San
but
Francisco.
still,
Right.
and this is where it's really difficult. And I think. Well, your job is to keep the trains running on time, is the euphemism. And there's a line between when government can intervene and when government just has to say, let the free market go. You must wake up frustrated about what you can and can't do about this, right? I mean, it's great for people who own property and their property values are going up. On the other hand, there's a lot of people who can't afford a $380,000 house.
Absolutely. It is frustrating. And I believe that we have to put more product into the market to stabilize what's happening here. But I also get frustrated sort of at the state level when we do look at Teslas and Amazons and Apples and all those things, about really that housing piece has sort of been left out. And one hand isn't talking to the other. And then at the end of the day, I mean, you know, I don't work at the legislature where, you know, it's a few months out of the year. It's for me and our council, it's 24/7. So we really feel those issues, and it is challenging, absolutely. And looking at more affordable housing, looking at workforce housing, I mean, I think it's really, really important. And then, you know, there are only so many developers that do affordable housing, right? And it can be really challenging for them to apply for these tax credits to do them. It takes a long time to get. So I think it's important that we help streamline the process, certainly for developers that want to come in and put product into the market if they're going to do affordable and workforce housing. I think there's, you know, certain things that we can do. Certainly the city also has some land. So we might not be able to bring money to the table, but we could also bring land. We can also require less density, which can certainly help. For instance, today we actually just approved an affordable senior housing project, and I'm really excited because it's in a part of town that hasn't had an affordable housing project built in over 20 years. But it's a senior affordable project, and they might require less parking because as you get older, obviously you don't drive as much. So where the city requirements might say, you know, we want you to have 3 spaces per unit, right? So I think those are ways that we can look at helping developers sort of streamline the process.
Do you see any sign that it's working? Because, you know, the story of what happened during the recession here is a little bit different than what happened in Vegas, where there were a lot of foreclosures up here, but there was a housing bubble, and it grew and grew and grew, and then it burst. And people talk about what's happening up here, and they see it. And as the mayor, you must like wake up in the middle of the night saying, you know, what if that happens on my watch? And there really isn't much you can do about it, is there?
Right. It's very frustrating. It does keep me up at night. It's a very, very stressful. I will say that. It's in some ways we are, but still at the same time, it just doesn't seem fast enough. Government is really slow, and sometimes it's painfully slow. And as mayor, a lot of times I don't have that luxury whenever I'm trying to explain to someone why they can't buy a house, or right now there's no inventory. Is anyone a realtor in this room? Raise your hand. Okay, there you go. Right? There's no inventory either. Right? There's no inventory in the market. So, and it becomes obviously more challenging for people to afford homes. And I know people are saying, you know, that average job now that's, you know, out at Trick is like, you know, $15 an hour. And I mean, do the math. I mean, still $380,000 is a lot of money, right? So it's a huge challenge. But the good thing is there are developers coming into the market. There's a lot of interest in this market, and that's what's really sort of exciting, and I keep having hope for, that are investing hundreds of millions of dollars into this market that are ready to be doing projects. And even still, we're still, like I talk about, we're still playing catch up. At the city, in the recession, we laid off over 700 people. So we're looking at, okay, how do we catch them up in planning and building codes, and then the other, there's also one thing we've been working with is working on the county side at the health department. We had to call a special meeting to work with sort of the health department and some of the struggles they've had, and so that can be challenging too, because obviously the county and the city are very different. And so, and the longer you delay, it can cost millions of dollars to developers. And obviously, it hurts the market by not getting more product into this market.
Is there, how fast is more product coming on? Is it going to happen? Because if more product doesn't come on, I was not that good in economics, but I can figure that part of it out. What's going to happen?
Right. It's certainly challenging, and
are developers coming to you with innovative ideas and saying,
all the time.
I can't do this tomorrow because government is so damn slow, and what can you do to speed this up for me? Was that the kind of conversations that you're having?
We hear it a lot, actually. We do. We hear it a lot, and so that can be very frustrating. And I'm not trying to say anything negative about my council at all.
We'll get to that part.
It's just that we talk about how critical housing is, and I get it. A lot of times they say, hey, we don't want to do this fast, we want to do it right, and I get that piece of it too. But unfortunately, time is not on our side, so I sort of get this anxiety over me that we have to really pay closer attention, and then I get really frustrated when at the council we talk about providing affordable housing and workforce housing, and then a vote doesn't, and then it's not voted unanimously. There'll be different reasons why, but it's hard for me to sort of walk away from that without feeling a little stung.
One of the other issues that's come up, and I heard you talk about this several places, including in that same KMPR interview, is this issue of strip clubs. Suddenly, everyone doesn't want strip clubs downtown, and you're cleaning up downtown. This issue is a difficult one, though, right? Because they've always been there. Where are you going to put them?
In your neighborhood. No, so here's the thing. So I think you put a moratorium on them, no more, that's it. I think we have 3 maybe in the city. But here's my issue with it. The city wants to move them, and they're talking about problems that are happening inside those places. And I think that you have to be very careful of sort of having that mentality of out of sight, out of mind, because then that's not really fixing the problem.
What's the problem?
If there's a problem, let's fix it inside. Do I have to say it? I don't know. Here's the challenge. Our city attorney went and did an investigation, and he came back that was not done through the Reno Police Department. And so I wonder, at this point, it's hearsay, and I think it's important for the police department to go in there and see what the challenges or the issues are. Exactly. Some people will say, oh, it's sex trafficking, or there's, an inappropriate, an inappropriate bachelor party. And I know some people might be shocked, but I would imagine that's what happens inside strip clubs.
Well, that's the point I'm getting at, though. that everyone's doing the, I'm shocked to see, these kinds of things going on in strip clubs, that some people might think it's just a pretext because you want to clean up downtown, you want to get rid of they're legal businesses.
Right. Well,
right?
I voted against it because I really believe they should be patrolled, they should be lit, they should be, regulated. There should be, stipulations that go along with that, just like any business. But I felt their solution was to really put it in someone else's backyard and sort of the out of sight, out of mind, and not address really what those issues are. And I think that's the wrong way to approach it.
Well, I guess it gets back again. I want to keep coming back to this because your philosophy as mayor in terms of what government should be doing and what government shouldn't be doing in the whole image of Reno. I know some people, and I hate to say this on that in front of you, but some people think that gaming, is a terrible vice, and that there's gaming addicts, and that these businesses are purveyors of vice too, and that some people might actually think they're worse than strip clubs. I know it's a horrible thing to posit, but and I'm not saying I believe that, but
right.
Who are you to be the moral police of this city?
Sure, and I sort of I believe that too. I mean, and I
you
think
believe everything I said about his business? Is no.
No, but and I was born and raised here. I mean, if I go to another city and walk into a 7-Eleven, I don't see slot machines. I think that's weird. I also think it's weird that I can't get a pizza at 2:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. How many of you guys, when you go and visit other cities, it shuts down so early? I was just in D.C. and my goodness, to get something after 9:00 was impossible, right? So I think we get sort of used to that, But I agree. I don't think that is really our position. I don't think we should. I mean, that is a moral issue. That's not good.
But you talk about going to D.C., and I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Conference of Mayors in a second, but I still run into people. I've been in Nevada now for almost 34 years, and people who say, what hotel do you live in? The kind of stuff that I got and they have this view of Nevada and what it's really about, that we're some kind of alien world, and that
it's true.
And so do you get that a lot? Do you have to combat that perception still?
People will say, first of all, they'll say, you live in Nevada, and I hate that. That's the one pet peeve with me. You live in Nevada where prostitution is legal. Like they think it's just everywhere.
Right, and then the prostitution is legal in Reno, they probably think.
And the other one, and you guys will appreciate this, when I say, I'm from Reno, and they say, how cool, you get to go to Vegas every weekend. Like I commute there, right? It's just a 10-minute commute, right?
No bowling jokes about Reno anymore?
No.
Have you ever seen the movie Kingpin? Never mind. We'll talk about that. But I mean, do you think that the image of Nevada is still a problem here? Because people seem to think we're finally over the hump with Tesla coming, with the diversification up here that has occurred with Trick. Do you think we're over it, or we never get over it?
I mean, honestly, think about it. Here's the thing. I am so fortunate. I get to meet with so many incredible companies, startups, massive Fortune 500 companies. That is something that they never, ever bring up. I've never had one that said, hey, Hillary, the strip club ordinance is making it so we don't want to come to Reno. I never hear that. So I don't believe that we're tainted by
what
that.
do they bring up? Do they bring up education? What do they bring up in terms of what might be negatives about coming here?
A
naive mayor? What is
it? Right? Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think.
I mean, what concerns businesses?
I don't, it's really hard to say, because right now, let me tell you something, this market is so hot that people are just wanting to be in this market. I just met with a really big investment company in the retail sector, and he was just saying, we just don't care, we just want to be in this market. I mean, Reno is on fire. People are, they are talking about us like nobody's business. And of course, I'm very proud, but it also does create challenges. You have to sometimes be careful of your own success, and that does happen. But right now, I would say some of the things I'll hear is, how do we sort of cut the government red tape? And I think that's just because I'm in politics. I'll hear that is, hey, Mayor, can we get this done faster? I'll hear that quite a bit with certain businesses that are, wanting to come and build here. So but it's really hard, because I have to tell you, Reno is, the last year we have been in so many national publications that we're really sort of that city that people have their eye on right now.
They say that still that all politics is local, and you've been grappling with this issue that I think you've never thought you would have to grapple with, and it's come right in the middle to some extent of the whole Me Too movement, where you've had these allegations in the city of sexual harassment. You've had a city manager who left. You've had these investigations. You've had these lawsuits now that are going on. You've had this city attorney who you mentioned earlier, who's essentially gone rogue and essentially has gone publicly. And I've known you a long time. I don't see you angry that often. You seem very angry. He essentially, wanted this woman's workplace lover history. Obviously, you're a woman. You have your own feelings about all of these things. You've probably experienced sexual harassment yourself. This has to have been a searing experience for you, both as a woman, as a mayor. I mean, it's really upset you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, part of the problem too is that I think it gets very convoluted on, our city attorney is elected. So it gets difficult on who you start to question, well, who do you work for? Do you work for the council? Do you work for the city attorney's office? Or do you work for the constituents? And that's why I called a special emergency meeting, because quite honestly, this council has been left out of the process. I don't like it whenever I get phone calls at 11 o'clock at night when a story breaks and we are finding out that motions have been filed, questions, certainly inappropriate questions have been asked. Quite frankly, I was disgusted by that question. It really bothered me. And so I really wanted to address it. This council has really been left out of the process. And so I guess I've always looked at it as, you represent us, but I don't think that is what he believes. And I think that's where the disconnect is. I think council feels differently, and he feels one way and we feel another. So
I know this lawsuit's going on and you may be limited in what you can say, but do you think, as the mayor of the city, that mistakes were made inside city government in all of this?
Absolutely. And again, I think that's whenever you come out and you say, we made a mistake and we're sorry. And that's, one of the reasons why I wanted to call that special meeting. I mean, it was an inappropriate question. I thought it was
not just that,
in
though.
Very bad taste. But I think, we have made some mistakes. There was also allegations of Councilwoman Dewar, being involved in this conspiracy with these other people that were involved, and she found out about it in the paper. And it doesn't seem like everyone is on the same team, and so I think this council has a lot of concern of the direction that it's headed. And I've asked him to recuse himself, and unfortunately, he said no. So. And
there's nothing you can do. He's a duly elected official.
That's right. He's elected. And I think that's frustrating too, because I think a lot of the public doesn't know that. I mean, people will just walk up to me and say, how could you ask that kind of question? Or, they don't really realize that he is elected. And so.
They think maybe you instructed him to ask that.
Absolutely. That's exactly what they think. Mm-hmm.
So I guess I don't want to spend much more time on this. You'll be happy to hear. And I guess I'm just wondering though, because I know it's been a very difficult issue for you. I'm sure you have some feelings about this whole Me Too movement, and you feel that these women should have their voices heard. On the other hand, there are people who are going to be accused because people have different agendas. And you have to protect the city as well. Where is this going?
Well, and I think it's also a different philosophy. I'm one of those that I think that you always get into a room. Certainly, I've been involved in a lot of lawsuits now with the city, and there's this mentality right now to, we can win everything, we can fight, we gotta fight, and then it just costs more and more money. And I think that you have to sit down and be very level-headed. And I think the fact, if you always think that you're right, that's where I've noticed you get into trouble. I mean, we thought we were right in other cases 100%, and we went in there and came back with a completely different outcome than what we had thought originally, and it cost us a lot of money because we believed we were so right. And I think that can get you into trouble.
Nevada courts, you can't predict what they're going to do.
No, you can't. You certainly can't, right?
I want to talk about a few other issues with you in the time we have left. And we talked earlier about how you are a registered nonpartisan, and people are always trying to figure out, is she really a Democrat? Is she really a Republican? But you do have some strong views on issues, and sometimes you're willing to speak out about them. And now, in the wake of, you already were on this national mayors group, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, I think it's called. And then, in the wake of Parkland, you have been very disdainful of this idea of arming teachers. You think that's a crazy idea. Is gun control something you feel very passionately about?
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely. And I mean, look at what's happened. I mean, it's really unbelievable to sort of see this movement that's taking place. And I was just reading a really interesting article about how they're talking about this demographic is so tuned into social media that they can really sort of move the needle. I mean, I think this is the first time I've ever seen it move at all, or a little bit, or it seems like maybe we'll get something somewhere, I don't know. But I think it's very concerning. I mean, these are teachers. So I can't imagine that. I think we have to reevaluate ourselves if we're saying that we need to send teachers to school with guns. I think it's really scary. So.
Took them 45 minutes to clap for something you said. I bet the under.
Thanks, Jon.
That's just because people feel. That's just because people feel very strongly about this issue, including you. And I'm just wondering, as mayor, you have a bigger voice than anybody else, essentially, in Reno to talk about issues like this. Do you think to yourself, well, maybe this is something I shouldn't talk about? I'm not talking about gun control, but any major national issue. Are there certain things you just decided you're going to be a spokeswoman for? For instance, I'll bring up another one.
Yeah.
The issue of prescription drugs and deciding that you're going to be a municipality that's actually going to say we're going to sue. And prescription drugs, excuse me, and mental illness, which is obviously mental health, and that's something you've decided as mayor to go out on something that usually the leader of a municipality might not.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you know me, and I get really passionate about certain things, that's one of them. I mean, that is one thing that the mayor is fortunate to have, is the bully pulpit, and that can be pretty strong. So I'm grateful for that. I also, during this whole shooting incident, you would see a lot of tweets and things like that, and I couldn't even bring myself to tweet because people were saying, you know what, it's time to quit tweeting or talking, let's do something, right? And so it really got me, it just got me thinking that there's a lot of things that we say but not what we do. But also, I'll get very passionate about mental illness and the opioid crisis, the ACA. So I do get vocal, but sometimes if you're not hearing me, doesn't mean that I'm not really passionate about it. And anyone that knows me, if I really believe in something, they're like, oh gosh, watch out. When she's mad, she's mad. Because it takes me a lot to get mad. It really does, right? You guys know this. And then when I get mad, they hate it. They hate it because I'm really, really mad. But I think it's important to stand up, and even if it makes you uncomfortable, it's important. I also think not everyone has to like me. I understand that. That's the best part about the country we live in, is that we are diverse and we all have different issues. And I can certainly respect other people's issues, even if they're not my views, certainly. And I also, that's why I am a nonpartisan. I always vote people, not party. Always, always, always. So.
Have you talked to the governor at all about mental health and mental health funding and how mental health is being dealt with or not dealt with in this state?
Well, and part of my frustration is, again, I don't think the legislature works well with local governments. Part of my frustration has been that a lot of legislatures make a lot of laws that end up affecting us at the local level, and we weren't even part of those conversations. And cities, we are dealing with them 24/7. The legislature, it's a totally different dynamic. So I get very frustrated. I will say this is the first time we're having conversations. We're looking at the NAMS campus for doing some mental health initiatives that I think are really, really important. I have a lot of respect for Governor Sandoval. I think he's done a tremendous job. I think that's one thing about him. He's always he's a class act. He really is. And I think he cares tremendously. So it's actually been nice. This is the first time that we've sort of worked with them on doing some mental health initiatives. And it's so incredibly important now more than ever. And I just want to ask this because I was speaking to a group. How many of you have someone in your family that deals with mental illness? Come on, raise your hand. I should raise both my hands. If I had a third hand, right? It's an overwhelming amount of people that are affected by mental health issues, and we just have to do so much more.
Do you think the legislature just looks down on you? And I don't mean you, Hillary Schieve, but on local governments? Do you think
I don't mean you, Hillary Schieve. I think it's getting better, but I think there's sort of this underlying, stay out of our way. And I would like to see, and I'm going to push for it now more than ever, someone who I work closely with, and I respect him a lot, has done so much for the city of Reno. He's here tonight. He's going to hate me for embarrassing him, but Scott Gillis has done an incredible job. But he has done an amazing job, but I
Are you saying he's running for the legislature?
Yeah.
Because that's news I got to
Breaking.
get on there.
Scott Gillis runs for Senate. I guess I just get super frustrated. I mean, here I am, the mayor of a city. This is where I just can't figure it out. That we don't have like I don't know what you want to call it, but a gathering or a symposium with the governor, with the senators, with the congressmen. That doesn't happen. We don't get in the room. And that creates a really, really big problem. I actually have to say, Congressman Amodei was nice enough. We've really been looking at streamlining infrastructure. And he was very gracious and said, hey, Hillary, I want to get everyone in the room. And that's the first time I've ever had that happen. Other than that, I think we get very disconnected, but we could do a much better job working together because we really do go hand in hand. But there's sort of this mentality that local governments are, sort of over here, and that's really changing. I mean, mayors all across the country are really at ground zero on so many issues, and so that's why Conference of Mayors has been so vocal about having access to the White House. During the Obama administration, I mean, we were invited at every opportunity. It was constant. We had, cards, we could call direct to the White House. I mean, the access was incredible.
But was it just lip service, or did they actually pay attention to you?
He was fantastic. Their administration was unbelievable, I will say. I mean, they were very, very accessible, and it's obviously very different, but.
One more thing about Conference of Mayors. You were made chair of this committee, this tourism, arts, parks, entertainment, and sports. I gather.
Tapes committee.
Yeah. I think they just did that just so they could be able to have that.
It was called
acronym.
APES, I guess.
Is that right? It was called APES.
Before I got there, it was called the APES committee. Tourism.
You put the T in tapes.
Okay. Put the T in tapes.
What's that doing? Is it doing anything to help Reno, help Nevada? What's it doing?
It is. It's a really exciting committee. It was actually chaired by Mayor Landrieu of New Orleans. How do you say New Orleans? That's how the New Orleans. That's how they say it. Because he gets mad if I don't pronounce it correctly, just like I expect him to pronounce Nevada correctly. And so he's done a lot of work for tourism and arts and parks and entertainment and sports. But what I love about it is that I think we get to focus now, obviously, on some gaming issues, legalizing sports betting, things like that. So I think they're really excited to have someone that comes from a gaming state. I'm excited about that. But I also, I just did a big Burning Man presentation. We talked about the $70 million economic impact that Burning Man has on our community. And it's really interesting to watch mayors when you talk about Burning Man, because they're like, what? What is this burning person? So I actually invited several of them out here in September. They're going to come out and take a visit, but really looking at the economic impact that arts has had on our community. But it's a really cool committee because I get to represent mayors from all across the country in Washington and on other initiatives. So I'm excited about it. I'm the first woman to chair in 30 years. So I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah.
You mentioned sports betting. I'm wondering what the discussions have been on that committee, because there's still this big court decision that's pending,
right,
on whether it's going to change. Do mayors of these other cities, are they open to it? Do they think it's a good thing if it gets more widespread or not?
Yeah, a lot of them have been very vocal about it. Matter of fact, so that committee is one of those committees that actually gets the most engagement. And mayors are really involved in that initiative, and they've been really supportive. So we'll see what happens.
Let's talk about some politics before we
Isn't that what we've been talking about?
No. And I alluded to it earlier, and I don't want to go too much into it, the specifics of it, but we've talked about how nice you are and how maybe a little bit naive you were coming into this, and you've now got what a lot of people see as some real personality clashes on that council, maybe what some people would even call dysfunction. And I'm wondering if Hillary Schieve at some point went from the we are the world attitude towards this to I just got to find 4 votes, and I'm wondering if that has changed.
Well, I think that anyone that sits on a board says, I just got to find 4 votes.
As opposed to saying everyone's just going to vote with me because I'm so nice and I'm the mayor, and
right,
every vote will be 7-0. Right? No. That hasn't happened.
No, that doesn't happen. And I actually, I completely respect my council for being very independent thinkers. Absolutely.
Euphemism alert.
Right. But of course I get frustrated. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's really hard for me to understand why someone would vote down an affordable housing project. I get really frustrated. There are days I absolutely go home and I say, what was I thinking? Why am I doing this? I'll feel, completely defeated. I mean, that happens. Absolutely.
What gets you to come back when you feel that way? I mean, because I bet you do feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely I do. I mean, oh yeah, and I take it personal too. I really, because I care so much. But I think, you know what, the next day, honestly, you'll have a little girl walk up to you and they'll say, one day I want to be a future mayor. And that is really inspiring. And then you say, okay, this is what it's about. Or being able to do an initiative that really changes someone's life. That is, it's pretty powerful, and it just makes me really grateful that I'm here to experience it. I mean, one day, it's moving by so fast, and again, I still think, wow, I never thought I would be the mayor of Reno, but I love the city more than anything, and I'm a huge champion for the city, and that's what mayors do, and so I do think that it fits well, but at the same time, it certainly, I do get defeated sometimes.
Is the council manager form of government a good form of government, or is a strong mayor form better?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on, who you ask. I mean,
I'm asking a mayor.
I personally think we should have a strong form of mayor government. I mean, it's no surprise that I went to the legislature and I brought that up, and I haven't talked about this a lot, and I would say that a lot of people probably don't know about this, but I did speak to the chair, and it was something they never wanted to bring up whenever the Supreme Court decided that the mayor is the same position as a city council person. How many of you in this audience think that the mayor is the same position as a city council person, right? How many of you? Raise your hand. Do you think it's the same?
Yes, I do.
You do? Oh, okay. There you go. All right, give it up for Mayor Kroll. Don't you love him? Love him.
Was there a Supreme Court decision on the mayor being the same as? I'm not familiar with that decision.
I think it's incredibly misleading. It's very misleading, and I'm the only one that has held that position. Besides, I believe Mayor Sferrazza. We've both held city council positions and mayor positions, and so we understand the distinction.
You mean in Reno?
Right. And the other thing is that the charter has not defined who represents the city. Now we've gone to ward-only voting, which is really difficult for me, because what happens is ward members become very entrenched in sort of their own wards, and it becomes, my ward, my ward, my ward. And I think it's important for the entire council to be concerned about the entire city, right? So it's not defined really even what does the mayor preside over. That wasn't even really defined. So for me, I think it should be a strong form of mayor government. I think it's an important role. I think the voters think it's an important role. I think the voters want to hold someone accountable, and it's the mayor. So that gets a little frustrating, because I don't think people realize the way that our government works. When people approach me in a grocery store, I can't just walk into Public Works and be like, hey, get this done. I mean, there's a whole process that you have to go through whenever you have a strong form of city manager government. City manager has a lot of power. And really the only one that we can control is the city manager.
So what about your political future? There are people who have wanted you to run for other offices, maybe even this year. There's been talk about it. Can you see yourself? You are running for re-election. You're sure you're going to file for re-election? You're 100%, even after this experience.
No, right?
Do you think about running for anything else?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'm so focused right now on Reno, and we've got so much to do that I want to just really focus on that. I think one day I would love to maybe be at the legislature and do something certainly for mental illness and drug addiction and things that I'm really passionate about. That would be great. I also think the structure of, they become very part-time. I mean, I think that should be a full-time position. They should be paid full-time, so that they can really put their heart and soul into it 24/7. I believe that. And also, and maybe there's not conflicts between, what your job is or who you work for during the off time or whatever.
Does that happen?
But I don't know. We'll see. Honesty. Politics is stressful. It's a very, very different time. I will say it's a very different time from what it was 3 years ago. It's a very interesting time to be in politics. Politicians are not well liked. There are times I find myself in public, and it can be a little overwhelming, because someone will literally walk right up to you and start yelling at you, or I've had a few scary instances at City Hall, and it's a different time.
Scary instances meaning?
Threatening, threats, death threats. I've had death threats. there are times that, and you're so accessible too as a mayor. I mean, I want to be. I think that that's really important. But at the same time, you kind of have to be aware of your surroundings a lot, and it's different. It's different, but at the same time, it's worth it. If you can make a change, it really is worth it. So I try not to think about that a lot. And then out of the blue, someone will run up to you and scream at you for believing in LGBT rights or something to that aspect, and so. That's a little odd. It's a little scary.
Disconcerting, yeah, I'm sure it is. There's another office in Carson City besides the legislature where you can have a big impact on issues like mental illness. And are you aware of this?
I'm trying to keep some of my hair in.
So. Are you going to endorse in any of these big races this time? I mean, do people come to you for your endorsement? I'm sure some of these gubernatorial candidates will. Maybe other races as well. What's your policy?
Honestly, I don't like to because I am a nonpartisan. So it's just one of those things I don't. If I feel strongly about someone, I will. If I really, really feel strongly about them. And I have endorsed, and I've endorsed Democrats and Republicans. So sometimes people are surprised by that. But like I said, I vote people, not party.
So when do you do it? It's just if you feel strongly enough about the person, you'll just say, all right, I'll do it in this case? How does that work?
Well, here's the thing. They don't have to agree with everything that I believe in. That I also don't want to see. I want to be able to have a healthy debate with someone. I don't want someone to be in a box with my thoughts. I mean, I don't think that's right. I mean, again, that's what I love about our country. That otherwise we would all look the same, wouldn't we? If we all wanted to think like everyone else. Matter of fact, Devin Reese is here, and I endorsed Devin Reese when you ran, right? And I don't believe with everything you say either. No, just
How much did that help him?
It didn't. It didn't. So you don't want my endorsement.
That was irresistible. I apologize. Yeah, exactly. Anyhow, Hillary Schieve, thank you so much for doing this. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for coming.
And give a big round of applause for Mr. Jon Ralston. And you guys all become subscribers, right? Yeah. So can I ask you a question?
Can I stop you?
Are you going to be on MSNBC anymore? Give us what's going on with that?
I go on there occasionally, not as often as I used to, though.
I know, but you use a hashtag We Matter.
They like that.
They like that.
Yeah. Well, I think because the Senate race and is going to be so important in the national picture, they'll probably have me on to talk about that. Mm-hmm. But it happens much more in presidential election years.
Okay, well, give us some insight on the governor's race. What do you think?
What did this just turn into?
I want to know.
What do I think of the governor's race?
Yeah, tell us. You want to give us some predictions? What's going on?
The governor's race, here's how I see the governor's race. I think that the Democratic primary is going to be unbelievably vicious once it really gets started. And I think that Steve Sisolak, who has raised a lot more money than Christian Giuliani, is going to have to spend every dime probably to win that primary. And I think he plans to. Mm-hmm. And I don't think everything that he spends is going to be on positive commercials. So I still think that she has a chance to win that primary. Mm-hmm. He's hired some of the best people in the country, but all of you know, who've been around Nevada politics for a while, she's been steeped in Democratic politics for a long time. She knows all these people. Yes. Not everybody likes her, yes. But
she seems to have a base up here.
Yeah, so yeah. I'm not saying she's going to win, but I'm saying that it's going to be very ugly, and I think whoever comes out of that primary is going to be very, very badly wounded. And while I don't think Dan Schwartz is a gnat, he will be obnoxious for Laxalt. Laxalt will win that primary, will have a ton of money and an unlimited funding source, and so I think he's a slight favorite. Mm-hmm. I do think that the national atmospherics will matter, and if indeed people want to say, oh, there's a Democratic wave coming, it's definitely going to happen, look at the generic ballot. I think it's way too early to make those kinds of determinations. I mean, You had Donald Trump today publicly come out for 3 huge gun control initiatives that must have driven Wayne LaPierre to, go crazy. So who knows? And I don't think Trump can do much to make his numbers come up, and I think there probably will be a big year for Democrats, but that primary for governor is going to really, really hurt them. I don't care what they say. It's going to really hurt them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what about the Senate race?
Well, Danny Tarkanian, as usual, started up here. And he's here. He's very good at this. And so I originally thought that he would actually beat Heller. I'm not so sure anymore. I don't think that's going to happen. Dean Heller shouldn't have won in 2006. He shouldn't have won in 2012. And he shouldn't win in 2018. But he won before. He's never lost. Jackie Rosen has been in politics for even less time than you have been. She's not very experienced. But if it's a Democratic year, it's not going to matter. And so I don't count Heller out, but he is a master of the self-inflicted wound. And so I don't.
Tell us how you really feel.
No, I'm just. Anyhow, that's all the time we have tonight.
No.
Thank you.
No.
Yes, it is. It is.
So you got to subscribe. But wait, I do have to tell them one thing.